Good afternoon and welcome back. Just a few reminders. Please remember to silence all your devices. Please also download the AWS Global Summits app, where you can share your feedback with us after every session you attend today. You can then redeem a free AWS branded swag at the info counter. All AWS sessions you see today are being recorded and available after the session via content devices on exit. Now, please welcome to the stage Shazli Mohammad Ghazali, who will present on Cybersecurity, a drive force behind cloud adoption. Shazli, please.
Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Shazli. I'm a public sector solutions architect based out of Malaysia. So today we're just going to talk about cybersecurity, a driving force behind cloud adoption. Okay. How many of you are security officers, CISOs? How many of you have to ensure security in your environment? Okay. I would expect actually it be everybody, because you have to be secure to put everything inside the environment, right? So these are some of the security concerns in terms of security in the cloud, especially inside the AWS environment. So we just compare about security traditionally. Why is security traditionally so hard? So things is like lack of visibility. In an on-premise environment, what you have is that you will have multiple types of components. Think about servers, think about routers, think about load balancers. These are basically from different sources, different vendors, different brands. And then each one has its own way of monitoring and managing its own security, its own auditing, its own logs. So once you have that, then as a security personnel, you will need to be multilingual in all these different devices. Okay. Next is lack of resiliency. So in order of having security, you need to have your tools to be very resilient. They should not be easily brought down. They should be available as much as possible all the time. Okay. So the lack of resiliency will give a lot of hindrance and a lot of challenges in order to monitor security. Defense in depth challenges. So defense in depth in a sense that how do you actually ensure a very, in a way, granular and microscopic security throughout your component. So everything from your virtual resources, from your instances to your routers, how do you actually ensure those types of security is being controlled from your environment? And low degree of automation. So in terms of how everything is manual. So if something happens, what do you do? If you open a ticket, someone has actually to run to a console and then find out what's the problem, then remediate the problem, and then bring the service up online after that. So these things will take time, and then if an attack happens, it will probably be too late, and you may not get a good image, or your organization may not get a good image after that. Okay. So in terms of how we can have it on the cloud, what will be the security benefits? You have increased visibility. What you can do, you can actually monitor a whole lot of your infrastructure. It's not component based, it's based on the holistically, it's almost everything in the cloud that can be monitored and visible for you. Increased availability and resiliency. So whatever services that you have, even security services, you can actually have it online as much as possible, and then you can actually monitor and automate things through defense in depth. So you're not worried about things whether it's a networking issue, is it a security issue, is it an availability issue, is it a cost issues. Everything is truly, you can actually monitor everything at once, and you can actually ensure defense in depth with our security infrastructure, ability to automate for governance and security operations. So basically you can automate these things with various tools inside AWS. Okay. So that's why in AWS, for us, AWS employees, security is job zero, and it's something that we really take pride and we really uphold to in this company. So visibility, what do we talk about visibility, especially for on a premise environment? So like I mentioned, if it's an on-premise environment, you would think that you know what is there. Physically, I can see my servers there, I can see my racks there. So if I have 10 servers inside my environment, I would expect to have 10 IP addresses there so that they all are communicating with each other. Then came virtualization. So each server, suddenly you are virtualized into 10 virtual machines. And now you have 100 entities that you need to manage. And then after that, you have networking and routers. So what we're trying to say is that even though it's on your environment, but it doesn't mean that you have visibility for that particular or for your total infrastructure there. Okay, that's why in AWS we have many ways of obtaining visibility. So the first and your first entry into AWS will be the console. So this is a very user-friendly user interface where you can actually find all the services. It's standard HTML web application where you can drag and drop and you can view all the services there. The flip side of that is that because it's a user interface, it may be quite slow and cumbersome to manage. So in a sense that if something happens, someone may need to go to the console and do click and actually monitor and see what is the health or what is the status of the security of your infrastructure. Then if we have system administrators, you have Unix and Linux administrators, they will be more familiar and more comfortable with things like CLI. So with the CLI environment, you will actually input your commands, just like a normal Linux command, and you can get all these system statuses, security statuses all inside one command. So what you do is you can probably, if you go with shell script, you can probably output to certain log files, and you can still have it. Okay, it's still a manual task. Someone still need to type it, but anything that may take like 10 clicks can be done with one command. There are things like resource tagging. So when you create a resource, you can tag to a certain project. So this will be useful if you want to have accountability to certain resources. So if a resource was created for the accounting group, and so you tag it to the accounting group, anything that happens to that server is accountable to that accounting group. Okay, similar to HR and other business departments there. But the key is actually APIs. So with API queries, this is where you can actually have automation. Any command that is done via the console, via the CLI, is all actually issuing stuff as an API. So with an API query, you can actually start to expose your services into other machines. So you can start to automate if you have certain tools, or if you're doing some sort of website to actually web services, so that you want to script it out via Lambda and based on certain triggers to do certain actions. This is how the key to have a more automated infrastructure. After doing that, then you have things like business intelligence tools. So as a higher management or a security officer, I want to see the status of security of my environment. So what we have tools to actually have it as a nice dashboard here is using some sort of span analysis, but then you can actually view it and you can customize it so that you will actually view it, the security events in your environment. So these things are available to maintain visibility, and we can have visibility with all the components of the AWS environment. So these are some of the services that provide operational visibility. So we'll just go through a bit what these services does. AWS Cloud Trail. Any action that is done on AWS is an API call, and any API call is logged into CloudTrail. So if you want to audit anything that has been called into the AWS environment, you would do it from CloudTrail. So basically, if someone has been, if you find out that some services has been down or some services are acting funny, you will go to a CloudTrail and will tell who, when, what time has this event been taken place. Okay. So CloudTrail has been there for API logging and is a good tool for security auditing and to see what has been going on in your environment. VPC, VPC is virtual private cloud. So this is an isolated environment for your AWS, for your organization in the cloud. So no one else can access your VPC unless you allow it to. So your VPC by default, it won't be able to access the internet as well. So what we can actually look for are things like VPC flow logs. So VPC flow logs are the network traffic activity that has been logged by AWS. So this can be piped into another logging analysis application, or if you have your favorite SIM and log analytics tools, you can actually pipe that into, you can pipe flow logs into that tool. CloudWatch. So CloudWatch is a mean to monitor how your resources are being utilized. Things like from CPU utilization, things like your flow logs. If you're using machine learning services, this thing can be logged inside CloudWatch. So what you will do is you will actually, either you can have it as a dashboard, but you can also pipe it to a log file where you can do a post-mortem analysis of the security application. WAF, Web Application Firewall, layer 7 security tool. So anything that is connected to your, or trying to access to your web application can be logged and controlled in terms of what sort of rules, whether you want to protect against like cross script security vulnerabilities, and if you want to do things like geolocation. So if you want to protect from certain IP addresses from certain countries, you can actually do so there with WAF. Things like Amazon Inspector. So Amazon Inspector will actually look at the status of your EC2 instances and see how secure those instances are in terms of policies and things like that. Trust. So those are the things where you can have like pure security tools to find out what's the security issues in your AWS account. Then Trusted Advisor is a bit more than that. So AWS has been around for about from 2006. We have a lot of experiences, and we have distilled that into a practice called well-architected framework. So this well-architected framework has 5 pillars, and one of it is security. So we base our Trusted Advisor tool on the well-architected framework. So not only can you monitor security, but you can also monitor things like cost optimization, resiliency, and operations to see how much your account is following the well-architected guidelines. And in terms of security, you can see checkpoints, and you can see what is the status in terms of like whether your security group is open to the world, in terms of whether your EC2 instances are compliant to certain standards which you have deployed or which you have agreed upon earlier. Then there's this thing called Amazon Macie. Amazon Macie is actually your data layer. So let's just say if you have things on your S3 bucket, you want to know that those things are safe and that they will pose little or no risk to your, if those data gets, if you want to expose the data. So what it would do is it will actually scan those security, the S3 buckets, and it will see whether you have sensitive data. Does it look like credit card information? Does it look like PII or private information data? Does it look like log or certain passwords, etc. passwords files inside there? So it will see whether the data itself is sensitive there. If it's sensitive, then it will advise maybe you should encrypt this sort of data there. It has also certain machine learning algorithms in a sense that it will see certain utilization or certain use case of your data. So let's just say that if this certain file is only accessed by this 2% from 9 to 5. So after a while, it will know that this is a trend. And if it says that there's someone else is accessing the data at the midnight and the weekend, then it will flag out to you, and then you can either take action or automate the actions from there. Okay. Then we have this thing called AWS Artifact. AWS Artifact is not a service per se, but it tells how AWS conforms to auditing certain auditing standards or guidelines. So we say how is it conforms to ISO standard? How does it conform to PCI standard? So you can actually view this, and then if you have a requirement to see how AWS conform to these standards, you can actually view from the artifact, and you can provide it to your auditors. Then there's this thing called guard duty. So guard duty is something we'll talk about a bit, but it's more of a threat detection system from AWS. So just a bit about global security standards. We have, and it's always with any government or regulatory body, they will ask what does AWS, what standard does it conform to? So we have compliance with many of these standards, be it worldwide, be it country specific. So in Singapore, it's compliant with MTCS. So this will help you to actually just to ensure the comfort that your infrastructure complies with the strictest security standards there. All right. Okay, so things like, so let's just say if you want to have, if you need to be compliant to certain security framework like the cybersecurity framework, Amazon can provide guidance on how services align to CSF, and then customers can leverage shared cloud services like FEMPREM and PATOS from other agencies. So you can actually you can actually look inside our information, our documentation, to see how it actually complies to these sort of standards. Okay. Next will be resiliency. So resiliency is an important factor in the sense that if your service is not up, then security gets affected as well. So in terms of our global infrastructure, we have 22 regions now. We've grown with another region with Bahrain announcement. So in a sense, you have choices of 22 regions, 69 availability zones for you to put your data, put your workload in there. Okay. In terms of having continuous access, and if you want to have high-speed access to your particular workload, we have 177 edge locations worldwide. So if you want to start to get your workload from a local audience up to a global audience, you can actually do that with our edge locations with services like CloudFront to stream media or any content to your audience worldwide. Okay. So just a bit of detail of our infrastructure. Each region is a physical location in the world where we have multiple availability zones. So it is a specific region within that geographic area, and mostly is in countries. So basically, if you have a workload that can only reside in one region, AWS by default will not move that workload to another region unless you want and program to move it to another region. Okay. So in terms of compliance, you can actually comply to one security standard rather than multi-country security standards. And in one region, you can have multiple transit points. So this ensures availability of network traffic into the AWS region. And each region is made up of availability zones, more than two, usually 3 availability zones. So what are availability zones? Availability zones are one or more discrete data centers with redundant power, networking, and connectivity housed in separate facilities. So one AZ is one or more data centers. So basically, you are leveraging on a real scalable infrastructure to host your workload. Okay. So with this, you can have resiliency within a region, and if you want the option, you can have resiliency inter-region if required. Okay. So let's go for architecting for resiliency in AWS. So this is your on-premise environment. So what you have you inside to take care of the perimeter, you would have a firewall. So this firewall is to represent not only firewall but other security tools to protect your perimeter. So maybe you have packet sniffers, firewall, and the things like that. And then you have load balancers to ensure scalability within the workload. And then you have, so in this workload, it's a 3-tier application with web app DB. So what happens is that if someone breaks into the firewall, then your whole workload is compromised. If your load balance is not HA, then your load again will get compromised. If one of your components there, like your web, gets compromised, then you may be still able to operate, but probably in a degraded form, probably like 50% down. Okay. So let's just say you want to start your journey from the cloud. So say, oh, I'm going to start my journey to the cloud today. How do I do that? And what would be the factors and components that are involved in the journey to the cloud? So once you go, you choose the cloud. You will pick a region. So this region, depending on what your criteria is, maybe you want to have something closer to your primary customers. So if it's Singapore, you may want to Singapore region. If it's ASEAN, you may still want to go to Singapore region. If it's Europe, one of the Europe regions. And then things like, then you will start going to VPC. So again, a virtual private cloud is a dedicated environment for your workloads. So this is how you control the security access in your private in your AWS account. Okay. Once you have that, you have availability zones. You can choose either availability zones, or you can let the system automate and choose what the availability zones are, and then you create subnets. So up to this point, you still need to have some on-premise skills, like networking skills, to plan your networking infrastructure and create those subnets. So you can have your public subnet for web access, your application for your business logic, and your database as your primary data store. Okay, then we have load balancing. So the elastic load balancing is where you will actually have the tool to actually spread the load around with all your instances, where you will have things like your web server, app server, and database server. So with this, you will actually load balance between multiple instances, and this is one how you cater for reliability. But let's just say, how about if you want to cater for performance? If you are a university and then you want to, in the beginning of semester, you need to cater for all this bulk registration that's coming into your web servers. How would you want to cater for that? So we have this thing called auto-scaling group, where you can actually, in a way, clone your resources so that it will actually scale out when the workload comes in. Okay, and then you will have things like the primary and secondary database for your data environment. Okay, so this is how you architect for resiliencies and auto-scaling group. So basically, in terms of scaling out your workload, one of the challenges is once you scale out the workload, how do you tell that these load balancers, how does the load balancer recognize which servers to point to? So basically, with the auto-scaling group, it was in close and hand-in-hand with your elastic load balancer to actually know where to map all this workload within AWS. Okay, so now we'll go to defense in depth. So how do you actually manage security within your AWS environment? Okay, so reality of many on-premise network defenses. So you have a hard outer shell, which is a perimeter, and then you have a soft and GUI middle, which is your LAN or data center. So what this means is that basically when we architect your security, you have protected with firewalls, you protect it with CDNs, you protect it with even physical infrastructure. You have guards and you have gates to protect your security environment. But what happens inside your LAN or your data center? So inside your network, if it's on the same network, probably you may not have any security controls to talk within the application or within the workload. So basically, you are actually anything from one server, if it's on the same network, it can talk to another server, and all the ports are open, and you can actually, that will be a security concern for you. So in a sense that a HR workload is not supposed to talk to an accounting workload, even though they're on the same network. So if you have in AWS, how it works, if you have the defense in depth at AWS at the perimeter, we have things like access control list or network access control list, which is a stateless firewall. So basically what it does is you have a blanket coverage of what items can go in and out of your network. And then, so basically, if you want to have dedicated connection into the AWS firewall, AWS environment from your on-premise data center. So if you want to have a dedicated lease line, we have things called Direct Connect, which is a private fiber between AWS and the customer. Okay. And then we have a VPN gateway. So if you want to have a VPN gateway in the internet, if it's more secure, it will be VPN within the Direct Connect lease line, so that you can ensure security for your connection from your on-premise environment into AWS. Okay. By default, when you create a virtual private cloud, there is no connection to the internet. Okay, so you would need to manage it via the console UI, or you would need to, and if it's not the console UI, basically no one can touch the environment there. So if you want to have an internet connection, then you put in an internet gateway to the public internet. Okay. For AWS, the DDoS protection, which is called AWS Shield, comes with AWS. So every time you create an instance, you create a network, the DDoS protection is already there with AWS Shield, so you do not need to be concerned about DDoS. Then with Web Application Firewall, so you can actually protect with Web Application Firewall for your Layer 7 application. So this comes to one case. There was a customer who actually wanted the Web Application Firewall when they moved to the cloud, and then they just wanted certain countries to access it, because inside on-premise environment, every time they have this event, it will always get hacked. So this is one of the use cases, is that they want to have a Web Application Firewall to limit the traffic coming from certain countries as well, only. Okay. AWS, we have many partners, so if you are comfortable with certain security tools, Cisco, Palo Alto, F5, you can actually use those partner solutions. You can purchase it from marketplace and deploy it in your environment. Again, we have Amazon Guard DT, which we'll talk about later on the intrusion detection. So now let's go between the workloads. So if you are an AWS user, you would be aware that you can create multiple VPCs inside your environment. When you create a VPCs, by default, these VPCs cannot talk to each other. Okay, so you will have no communication between Amazon VPCs. So it could be another organization, or it could be just another subsidiary of your organization. So if you did want to connect to each other, how would you do that? Okay. So there are many options. So if you go from the top, if you wanted to, you can have an internet gateway via VPN, and you want it to go through your data center and then come back. That's possible with VPN. If you wanted a one-way communication between the VPC 1 and VPC 2, then we have private link, where you can just have a dedicated connection for that environment. Or you can have VPC peering, so you can have private network connection between Amazon VPCs. So if you want to have a VPC pairing, then you will need to have a request to the partner VPC, and you can pair that so that it would look like it's in one Amazon account. The pros of this is that if you have things like security groups, it will actually honor those type of security groups permissions with a VPC peering. So now, how about inside the workload? So basically, if it's in the same account, how would you control that? So you have a 3-tier application from Web App DB. So we have a tool which is a security group, which is a stateful firewall between each application tier. It does not allow peer-to-peer communication by default. So basically, you had to specifically allow from one entity to another entity how the security would work. Okay, so if you have a web, to access a database from the web server, you still need to go to the application server. If you want to go web to the DB direct, that would not be a good practice, because if your web server is compromised, then it's game over, right? So you can actually do that, and because of the security group, you do not need to specify contiguous IP addresses. You just need to have whatever that's tagged to that security group, you can allow it based on that type of policy, right? So again, if you have any third-party endpoint protection that you require, be antivirus, firewall, the host intrusion protection system, our marketplace is available for that. Amazon Inspector is to inspect things within your environment, where to see how much your EC2 instances or resources comply to your security policy. System managers is operation review and control of resources. So this is a way if you want to ensure like patch compliances, if you want to have secure access to the resources there, you can use AWS Systems Manager. Side note is that System Manager can also be used to control your on-premise VMs as well. CloudTrail. So if you have CloudTrail API logging, which we talked about previously, CloudWatch for event management, and then guard duty again. So signature and behavior-based intrusion detection system. Okay. So again, so what are the things that affect defense in depth? Okay. Remove humans from the data. So basically what happens is that if your security policies is reliant on human intervention, in a sense that if an attack comes in and then you need to have someone to actually handle the case and fix the event and then remediate and then bring the service up, that would not be a most efficient way of doing things. So what you would need to do, you would try to automate. So there are things like security, as you heard about infrastructure as code. So now we can have security codified, okay, with this. So the main message is that try to automate as many things as you can and reduce manual workload, especially for security incident responses, okay. So we saw there was a lot of references of Amazon Guard Duty. What it does is it is a service that monitors security threats in your Amazon environment. So there are things in white which are signature-based and stateless findings. So these are based on certain signature which comes from security feeds like from CrowdStrike and Proofpoint. Or you can have like custom security feeds managed to be analyzed and to be probed and see what the security status are. The stuff in blue are behavior and stateful findings, anomaly detection. So so things things that are happening, it will try to learn about your the normal way, and then if there's any anomalies, it will flag out and say this is something's funny with here. So things like reconnaissance, spot scanning, instances compromise, malicious API call, those are things which is signature based with Guard Duty can monitor. Things like outbound DDoS and things like Bitcoin mining. If somehow someone managed to get to a server and then they install some Bitcoin mining to make some extra money, how would they know that? So with Guard Duty, they will see, oh, something's funny with this environment, and then they will actually report and say, someone is making money, please do something about it. Okay, so how we do is automate with integrated services. So in a sense, we have tools to enable all this automation. So an example would be that this with the threat remediation. So there's a Guard Duty. It knows that there is an SSH brute force attack from this particular IP address. CloudWatch, it will go to CloudWatch. CloudWatch will actually log this event, and then you can actually have that to be an alarm and be an event-based action. So Lambda is our serverless tool. So what this is run based on certain activities. So in this case, it will be a CloudWatch event, and then you write your Lambda function to say to the WAF, this particular IP address is deemed to be a malicious attacker. Please disable it from your WAF firewall. Okay. Then it will actually do that. Then it will create the filtering and automate the remediation step for that. You can also automate it to be integrated with your on-prem or things to modify and update your CNDB or your content management database. So we can integrate tools like Ansible, Chef, and Puppet if you're using those tools, and you can update things like Slack. So if you have a channel, a team channel that monitors security, it can help to update that. Okay. So inside, so workload operator for AWS, when you move to the cloud, most probably it will actually go with the mission applications, and then they say, oh, I want to move to the cloud, but then the security guy will say no. And then, so what this says, you should have your security operations to be win the journey to move to the cloud, so that they also can monitor and control it, and they also can benefit from having a secure environment for your organization. Okay. So a summary, the cloud is not only secure, but through shared responsibility, well-architected solution and best practices, it can even be more secure than the traditional on-premise data center. So with this, with whatever that we talked about, with all the benefits in terms of visibility, automation, and resiliency, this will help you to make your cloud environment to be even more secure, or than comparing with your on-premise data center. Okay. So with that, I'd like to thank you, and please complete the survey and submit your session feedback. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Shazli. Please remember to submit your feedback on this session in the app to redeem the free AWS branded swag. If you're interested in having a copy of the slides, please tap your badge on the content devices at the exit. The next session in this room is Building Intelligent Applications, No Machine Learning Experience Required, and it will begin promptly at 4:15 p.m. Thank you.